From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Well, do the panelists have any questions for each other?
I totally do.
Yeah? Okay.
I was really, I have to change my whole posture because I was on the hot seat and scared, but now I'm like, oh, I'm asking questions. But I was really compelled, Trevor, by this notion of the community of practice as something that just can't be spontaneous and something that takes work. And I was just wondering, with the kind of work you do, can you say a little bit more about sort of what those challenges look like? You said this thing, and it fit in the talk, because your talk was like the bomb. But if I were to step back, I would say that it was a little bit out of place in the sense that you said this thing where it was like, some people might come to work that day and not be feeling all the weight of the world of the things happening outside. And I thought it was very telling, an amazing way of like, when you're doing the work and you're doing the good work and you're doing the work that matters, right? And then you're working with a team and everyone doesn't have the same relation to the work. Can you say more about that?
Right. Well, I think it's, so one thing I didn't get to say was that part of sort of trying to imagine this structure and sort of keeping our community sort of before our eyes is, I think, to grapple with, the ways in which our different experiences are producing the new knowledge right there as we're having our different experiences, and not to say that that stuff is outside of the work that we're doing, but to try to understand how that comes into the work we're doing, and whether it's my experience that day or someone else's experience or all of our experiences, to find out how those different ways of coming to the work then shape the work, rather than trying to draw the boundary and say, oh, if we only keep all those things outside, then we can get on with it. Mm-hmm. So I guess that was partly what was on my mind.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
We have a question back here. If you can yell, I'll repeat it.
Sure. It was actually something that resonated with me very much from Marissa's talk, actually, about thinking about these questions of deletion in the archive and our interfaces to what's deleted or missing, or what we ourselves need to protect in the archive. And so actually, I wonder if you have some reflections on this as well. But just as a sort of general way of saying, certainly, being attuned to looking for what's not in the records, that's not a new thought, but also sort of trying again to sort of return to the conversation we were just having about, what do I see from my perspective, what does someone else see from their perspective, and can we sort of piece that data together? Though now I'm trying to put it together with this idea of data and datum. I'm not going to be able to do it on the fly. So certainly there's that. Thinking about being conscious of the ways in which the people who might be in this archive are in the archive because they are being represented there, from, like by the state or from some other body, and not in their own control. And that, maybe we want to recover their story, but maybe we also, sort of don't want to expose, populations that, have been sort of mistreated in certain ways. And so there's a lot of it that goes into it. We're really at the beginning of our process, and I'm learning from a lot of my colleagues about what they're bringing to this, what they want to look for. And so I think we'll have a better answer for you, in a year or in 6 months. And we're really kind of at the beginning. But I wonder if you had any reflections on that.
Yeah, I really don't know. There's so much in that question. It's the question of translation, right, between media and thinking about what happens when one thing becomes another. I do think the question of exclusion, right? You have exclusion that's sort of personal agency and choice, as I was trying to talk about it, but then there's also exclusion as protection, which I'm really compelled by. The social media stuff I just find, thinking back to Burgess's talk, is just terrifying to think about, right? And so there's a way in which imagining, to think about what should be excluded has to take into account, one, the imagination of the future this archive can produce, but at the same time understand the ways in which it's always an artifact of the present. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the problem of the present. In a way, when we're talking about exclusion, it's the person who's standing there, who remains, who says no more, right? And I'm sort of babbling around this, but it's like I can sort of see it where we're trying to, I think both of us, you more so, because it's something you're thinking about on the ground right now, though I guess I am with the Zane Scenes project, sort of thinking about what it means to have to at every moment also understand yourself as a steward, right? And what constitutes good stewardship. And at the same time understanding that stewardship was never necessarily, not never, in many cases was not necessarily given to us. No one handed us stuff and say, please take these things and do this stuff with it, right?
Yeah, to have humility about that,
Right.
about the stewardship. And that was a theme we heard earlier as well.
You talked about the train-the-trainer for making librarians more digitally sufficient. How will you get in contact with the programs that are in your local area?
So we are reaching out, so in terms of our pilot workshops, we have natural contacts already with librarians who are interested. We're promoting at least the pilot workshops. So each partner institution does have plans to not only work with their own librarians in the pilots, but also reach out to their programs, other programs in the area, other librarians, and start bringing them in. And then we have started reaching out to programs and librarians in the area, so in Atlanta, and then thinking at major conferences and how we partner with libraries. And so reaching out both to digital humanities librarians and digital scholarship centers, but also anybody who has natural inclinations to be interested in this work. And there's a number of outlets that we'll also reach out to as well.
Any other questions? Right here.
Also for Professor Green and the whole panel, in your training, there's a lot of talk about collaboration today. Have you thought about training librarians and the researchers together?
I mean, certainly that's something that we're explicitly doing and thinking about, these ideas of mutually informing expertise and ignorance going back and forth among actually the many different positions of people in the trainings, rather than, thinking of it as, one set of experts clearly delineated at the front of the room communicating to other groups. So yeah, we're explicitly trying to do that.
And I mean, in past, actually in general HTRC workshops, we do that already. In our different iterations, we teach both librarians and researchers in our workshops. And the idea with the grant, it's specifically focused and targeted and mandated for librarians, but we're definitely anticipating and trying to develop the curriculum so that librarians are able to teach researchers and students across all disciplines and from all research questions. So it's actually kind of interesting challenge with the curriculum, both addressing what librarians need to know and kind of addressing their needs, but also thinking through how do we enable them to then train all sorts of audiences.
Yeah. And at Five College Digital Humanities, we have a sort of very explicit setup where we very actively encourage. So we do most of our training around projects. So we develop the training as projects go on so we can develop a sense of what people need. Then we offer just a little bit of workshop around the edges to get, whet the appetite so that people want to learn more. in terms of bringing their own sort of subject areas. But we have a very explicit rule about sort of flattening out some of those relations whenever possible. So faculty, staff, and students are equally eligible to be PIs together on projects. And we encourage projects to have to work across campuses and also across those categories as a way of sort of emphasizing not only just collaboration like yay team, but emphasizing collaboration of understanding that those subject positions also bring different kinds of expertise, even if they share a common interest, and that sharing of expertise is somewhat mandatory. I hate using that word.
Okay, what are they? Can we have the microphone down here? Thanks.
The farthest possible point.
Or just pass it, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so we just got, about 7 minutes ago, a tweet came in from Dr. Hazard. And the question is, it's not to anyone specifically, but in general, diasporic communities of practice aren't represented in cataloging schemes, tech and digital. So how do you manage the levels of those? I thought it was a great question.
Yeah, I mean, that question's, I'll respond because I feel like I was trying to talk a little bit about that. It's a challenge. I think that's the thing. That's sort of why I sort of said it very quickly towards the end, but for me, that's what Mbembe, who doesn't really, is not a digital scholar. But I think it's incredibly important because what Mbembe is trying to get us to think about are the ways in which inclusion is nothing without a transformation of the actual structure, right? So I think that's absolutely true that in many ways, the practices of various diasporic and indigenous communities are not, or even of frankly white or what we think of as sort of mainstream communities, aren't represented in the interfaces and ways we use these archives. But I do think that when we're thinking about, this is the inclusion narrative where you just imagine that life is just this big pot and if you just get more different kinds of people in it, we'll all be okay, right? And I can't lie, it makes me happy. I want to be in the pot, like, woo, pot, right? But at the same time, there's a way in which when you're talking about transformation, by default, when you're thinking about the digital, it has to be a technical, structural transformation, right? So I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I do think, so we have groups that are looking, for instance, at using Twine, using different ways of using other kinds of programs that enable you to produce interactive interfaces, because I do think interactivity doesn't sort of solve or fix everything, but it does get us a little bit closer to thinking about sort of the call and response and the give and the take and whatever it might be from various communities, right, that could really be useful for thinking about the work of archives in the digital.
Another question from Twitter? Okay.
To what degree are people represented in archives there voluntarily or by the will of others? And how would they themselves want to be seen? That's a question from Elise Engdahl on Twitter.
Wow. I don't know about the global answer to that question. I mean, I think it's certainly true that we have more, like collections of state records or organization records, and that the idea of a sort of community archive, which is in the control of those people who are maybe themselves represented in it, is relatively newer. That's not a very satisfying answer to that question. So, I mean, I think it's a dynamic that we all need to be aware of, right? And it shouldn't come as a surprise. But for instance, sort of like some of the work that Jarrett Drake is doing about thinking about the differences between those two types of records or those two types of archives, is informing, I think, a lot of the conversation right now. But I couldn't give a global answer to that.
Yeah, I think unfortunately the answer is just very often they're not. Right, and I think it goes to the state thing. The stuff we have, the materials that we have the most of are the things that were probably collected in the least desirable ways, right? Which is another thing to reckon with. I do think and not to be Pollyanna, but I think a lot of the talks today reflected that's why, and the work you're doing is so important, of just empowering more people to actually create those collections. And I would argue also technically, or not even just technically, even collaboratively, more people to create experiences of those archives digitally as well. Those are two things that both have to happen. And so not to just sort of deflect this question onto like this future, but I do think it's something we have to think about, because at the end of the day, most of these answers are never going to sound very good because it's not actually a happy past.
All right, so we'll have to end there. Thank you for sharing your work and your thoughts with us. And let's give them a round of applause.
You're going to come see us at 5 College CH?
Oh, yeah.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.